live with one of the biggest stories, news that's just coming in. Dr. Manmohan Singh, the 14th Prime Minister of India, is no more. He breathed his last in AIMS. He was taken to AIMS in the emergency department, and it's only official now. There's an official confirmation coming in that Dr. Manmohan Singh is indeed no more. We've heard a lot of his economic achievements as an economist, as the finance minister of India, and later as Prime Minister of India as well. But he's had many foreign policy achievements as well. Here at India Today Global, we'll discuss what his foreign policy achievements and some of the challenges and failures have been. To discuss Dr. Manmohan Singh's legacy, I'm being joined by Indrani Bagchi, a former journalist, was the diplomatic editor with Times of India for years, and now is the Chief Executive Officer of Ananta Center. Indrani Bagchi, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Indeed, a very sad day. He was 92, but he's had a lot of achievements. He's had a lot of criticism also from various quarters. We'll have to see how it is that now the leaders in India and across the world are going to remember Dr. Manmohan Singh. Someone very famously had said that history will remember him kindly. According to you, what have his achievements really been, and some of the challenges that he faced, especially to do with the United States of America, and how he changed the dynamics for India when it comes to the US?
Yeah, thank you, Geeta. And yes, it is indeed a very sad day for India. Dr. Manmohan Singh was the architect of the economic reforms of 1991 when he served as finance minister to Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, where in many ways he was covered by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. In 2004, when he was the surprise pick for Prime Minister by Sonia Gandhi of the Congress, there were apprehensions about how much he might be able to achieve. I think what the legacy that Manmohan Singh left in foreign policy terms is considerable. Certainly, in 2005, Manmohan Singh was on that flight to the US to sign what turned out to be a game-changing, a completely transformative agreement on nuclear power, on what we now know as the Indo-US nuclear deal, on 18th of July 2005. To take his signature, I'd say, accomplishment was not merely to sign that deal, but to take it to fruition 4 years later. And for that, Manmohan Singh, I think, will always go down as a courageous prime minister, because with a minority government, not a minority government, but it's a struggling government, having coalition partners like the communists, Manmohan Singh risked the future of his government. He threatened to resign and dissolve his government if the deal wasn't ratified by the parliament. And it took a supreme act of political, shall we say, machination, for want of a better word, to get the support that he needed to clear the deal. And for that, Manmohan Singh deserves respect, deserves congratulations, because I would say that was his signature achievement.
Well, Indrani, for our viewers, a lot of them would say that he was a very silent prime minister. He looked the other way. He would listen to 10 Janpad, that the orders came from 10 Janpad. And for all the domestic policies, some of the cases of corruption that he had to deal with later, he did keep quiet. But this was one instance where, despite the left threatening to pull out of government, he stuck his. He really wanted the deal to come through. If you could recall what really happened, how did he ensure that this go through, not just here within the Indian Parliament, but also with the United States of America? There was a lot of to and fro, and India got a deal, but a good one at that, not one that was a compromise deal where it just went through because they wanted to show something, that there was something to show for.
No, no, no. It was much bigger than that. In fact, that flight that we were on that flight to the US, and on our way back in 2005, after the deal was signed, the tradition used to be that the Prime Minister held a press briefing with journalists on the way back, and I remember Manmohan Singh talking to us, and one of us asked him, what is the importance of a deal like this? Nuclear issues were always abstruse, meant for the small community that was a strategic community in those days.
They like civilians.
No, they're much better people than me. But Manmohan Singh, actually, I remember this. He said to us that day, he said, this deal will be for India a moment of strategic opening, in the same way that the 1991 economic reforms opened the Indian economy. And I think if you look back today, you can see in how many different ways that deal has manifested itself.
Absolutely.
The other thing that Manmohan Singh was a big believer in was the relationship with the US. I mean, please remember that India is a famously US skeptic country, and we remain a US skeptic country. Manmohan Singh used to say that a closer relationship with the US would be transformational for India. And I don't know if you remember this, but in his last visit to the US, before George Bush demitted office, Manmohan Singh went to meet him for the last time. And his words to him was to the effect that, Mr. President, India wants the US to succeed as a power. And that was as famous as, I mean, we all now remember Narendra Modi saying that India has gone beyond the hesitations of history. But years ago, this was Manmohan Singh who said exactly these words to George Bush when he went to meet him. And that belief in the strength or the depth of the India-US relationship stayed with him throughout his tenure.
It also ended India's isolation, the long isolation that India faced from various countries, various quarters after the nuclear tests.
Well, I think, when Manmohan Singh came in as Prime Minister, that sense of isolation had gone, because what were we doing then? We were negotiating at the time an agreement called the HTCG, which is a high tech cooperation group, and these were all alphabet soups back in the day. We were negotiating something called the Next Steps in Strategic Partnership. That evolved into the nuclear deal, and Sham Saran, former Foreign Secretary, actually saw that deal through. But that apart, I think the other thing that Manmohan Singh did was to work on the India-Japan relationship. Another relationship that another relationship that he literally put down roots for that relationship. If you remember, Japan was very mad at India for the nuclear tests, and it took a long while. It took somebody like Manmohan Singh and his repeated visits to Tokyo. I remember one visit, he said that it was his 20th visit to Japan. He was, again, deeply invested in that particular relationship. And there he shared with Prime Minister Modi, that belief in the India-Japan relationship. Both men had...
And the Quad, Indrani, a lot of people
Well,
think that Quad is where it is today is because, and it is a lot to do with the leadership level meetings, a lot to do with this government, but the seeds were sown when Dr. Manmohan
see,
Singh was Prime Minister.
that actually came, in fact, this day, 26th of December 2004, exactly 20 years ago today, was the tsunami. The tsunami was the Asian tsunami of 26 December 2004, was the prompt for the Quad, which was started as these four countries putting their resources together in what is called humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations in Asia, in the Indian Ocean, South China Sea, etc. And that was literally the start of the Quad. As you know, the Quad died in 2007 under a lot of other pressures. That's a different story. But by then, Manmohan Singh knew that he couldn't revive that Quad at that time. So it became dormant for a few years before being resurrected again. By 2008, Manmohan Singh actually was one of the people, if I remember correctly, who pointed to the subprime crisis. As an economist, he was looking at the subprime crisis that was brewing in the US. Nobody else really focused on it at that level, but he was doing this press conference with Sarkozy, with Nicolas Sarkozy, who was visiting. This was at the Hyderabad house in Delhi, where Manmohan Singh had he devoted an entire paragraph to expressing his concerns about the future of the global economy. And soon enough, of course, we went into the global financial crisis. But so yes, there were a lot of things. 2008 was a terrible year for him as well, in another way, because it was also...
We're going to come to Pakistan. We're going to come to
That's
Pakistan,
right.
Before that, neighborhood. We saw Nepal, Bhutan, the Maldives all turn democratic, become democratic countries during his prime ministerial tenure. And while there have been ups and downs in the relationship and a lot of criticism drawn when it comes to how he handled Pakistan, what's your take on India and the neighborhood under Manmohan Singh?
It's not very different from what it is today. Within the neighborhood, we have our ups and downs. If you remember, Manmohan Singh was also the prime minister who refused to visit Dhaka for a SAARC summit, and we didn't have a SAARC summit that year. We haven't had a SAARC summit since. It's not just a question of neighboring countries doing well with him. This is a rocky relationship. It will go on. It was with Pakistan that he spent a lot of his personal capital,
invested
and
himself,
lost. Yes, and lost. And it, in many ways, it soured the pitch for future relations. So, with all the best of intentions, but it wasn't what anybody wanted at the time. or even today, frankly. I mean, the Sharm el Sheikh agreement, for one, the way, yeah, uh, it's a lot of it was that he wanted it to work. He wanted this relationship to work. There were very difficult. That was a very, very difficult period between India and Pakistan, and I don't
Also,
think
he
that was
wanted to
something
trust
that
them, and then there was an entire betrayal that would follow suit. You'd see that
it was not.
it was a pattern with Pakistan.
It was never a betrayal. It was always Pakistan being true to form and India not recognizing it or not acknowledging. So it was never a bit. Pakistan never pretended to be anything different. So it
Okay.
wasn't like.
A lot of our viewers in Rani would not know what happened in Sharm el Sheikh. You were there, you saw what happened, Shiv Shankar Menon coming out, announcing, and then not realizing exactly what happened till the journalists started reporting it. So, explain to our viewers what happened in Sharm el Sheikh so that they get a context of why
Well,
the criticism.
it was the Indian and Pakistan leaders who sat in that room and decided to smoke the peace pipe in a way that, well, I think the dramatis personae in that particular incident are still around, and it was not India's best moment at all, because among other things, it opened up Balochistan as a point where Pakistan could equate its its travails in Balochistan with what India was going through in terms of cross-border terrorism. That was a huge blow. It took Manmohan Singh's party to actually walk back from that agreement.
Yes. Apart from Pakistan, the other challenge has been and was, even during Manmohan Singh's tenure, China. A major challenge, one that back then the opposition really took two foreign policy issues to every campaign, to every election campaign, and that was his failure when it comes to Pakistan and China.
Well, in 2005, the Manmohan Singh government actually, they negotiated the guiding principles and political parameters for an agreement or an understanding of a future boundary resolution with China. Within 6 months, China had rescinded. China walked back from one of the most key elements of that particular agreement. So that was dead in the water. By 2010, there were regular aggressive patrolling by China in the border areas. The other was that there was one interesting and signal change, which was nothing that you could see in public, but for the first time, India acknowledged that its decades-old policy of leaving the border areas between India and China in an underdeveloped state was actually proving to be counterproductive for India. Again, it was if I remember correctly, it was Shyam Saran as Foreign Secretary who very famously walked across the road to his Home Ministry counterpart to set up the first border development mechanism, where border infrastructure started to get greater primacy. That, of course, became a much more what's accelerated and deepened by the following government. The other thing that happened in 2013 was the first Debsang incursions by China. That was a moment. It was a very tough moment. It was 3 weeks standoff with China, and it took a lot to bring relations back on an even keel. In fact, Manmohan Singh actually deputed Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who was then the vice chairman of the Planning Commission, to make the announcement on an understanding with China at the end of that particular standoff, which I remember we all reported in surprise because it was not coming from the foreign ministry. So yes, those were tough days. Yeah.
Coming back to Dr. Manmohan Singh's legacy, now we do know that he's had a lot of achievements, but there has also been a lot of criticism, policy paralysis. The latter part of his tenure was marred by economic slowdown, sluggishness in the economy, so on and so forth, and then, of course, corruption scandals. In your appreciation, Indrani, do you think that his achievements outweigh all the criticism that he's had to suffer over the years, or there's much to a man holding the position of prime minister and yet turning a blind eye to what's happening right under his nose?
There is no getting away from the fact that he did turn that blind eye. There is no getting away from the fact that he could not and did not exercise prime ministerial authority when the corruption scandals were breaking out. It was not just economic sluggishness. We had the one thing we could hear over and over again was issues regarding transfer pricing, terms which we have forgotten, but transfer pricing, intellectual property rights. We had U.S. presidents, U.S. Senior officials come and lecture India. U.S. put us on a special 301, and it was the second term. In so many ways, was a washout. Was a political, economic, strategic washout. Manmohan Singh, having done that heavy lifting to get a nuclear deal across, killed his own achievement by passing the nuclear civil liability bill in Parliament in 2010, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And that stopped any chance of any reactors or taking that deal forward in any meaningful manner. So that was so yes, those were, I think history would judge him a little more harshly than he deserves, much more harsh than he deserves. And I don't think a lot of it was his fault, because he remained a prime minister who had to keep answering back to his political bosses. That was always going to be a problem, and it was a problem. Although I have to say, I don't know if you remember, but the last press conference that Manmohan Singh did in 2014, before he demitted office, and he was asked what was his biggest achievement, he named one. That was the nuclear deal.
That was the nuclear deal.
And he said that, and it was he who said that history would judge him more kindly than the media. That was his line.
It was his own line. But again, when he met with President Obama, and President Obama and I remember this very vividly, had said that when Dr. Manmohan Singh speaks, everybody listens.
Indeed.
And we have very few leaders who actually have been so appreciative or hailed an Indian leader the way Obama did, Manmohan Singh. What's your memory of your interactions with Dr. Manmohan Singh? And if there's anything, because he had a good sense of humor too. So, any memory that you could share, a snippet or some interaction that you've had on board
Yeah.
or, off?
Yeah, well, there were many. We used
The
to
Prime
travel
Minister.
with. Hmm.
Yeah,
There
for
were
our
many
viewers,
where
I should
we.
tell, I should again, there's so many of our viewers in Rani who wouldn't know that there was a time when Indian journalists would travel with the Prime Minister, and the Prime Ministers used to, which was including Atal Bihari Vajpayee, would interact with
Yeah.
journalists, have informal conversations, remember the names of journalists, sometimes even remember if they have children, ask after their children, so on and so forth. So, what's your memory, just one vivid memory of your interaction with Dr. Manmohan Singh?
I mean, Manmohan Singh, in his first term, Manmohan Singh was a lot more outgoing with journalists, lot more. And we would sit and talk about so many things. And on one of our trips, he used a line, he said something which I have used as a quote several times when political journalists asked him, "Oh, that are you only focused on the economy, or are you only focused on economic issues?" So he said one line. He said, "When economics becomes big enough, it becomes strategic." And that was I was see, he was a thinker. He was an intellectual. There was one one event at his house where I heard him talking to a journalist who had come to interview him from some part of the world. I cannot remember now. And Manmohan Singh gave him a sort of chapter and verse lecture on South Korea's urbanization experience, and how that helped in the development of South Korea as a major economy, and which was, I mean, as an intellectual exercise, it was joy listening to a prime minister talk like that. So yes, and he had, as I said, he had the same relationship with former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that Narendra Modi did, and two very, very different people. It tells you of the skill of Shinzo Abe to be able to build such close relations with both Manmohan Singh and with Narendra Modi. So yeah, there were many. I mean, I think we traveled quite a bit with Prime Minister Singh.
Also, before I let you go, Indrani, a very simple man, huge achievements, some challenges, of course, a few failures as well. But for all the corruption charges against him, there nobody can talk about him as having personally earned out of those corrupt incidents or events, and and nobody can charge him of nepotism. He's actually lived a very simple man, family quite away from politics and from any gains whatsoever that people might have had
Completely.
because of him being prime minister.
I don't think anybody charged him with any corruption. And nobody who knew Manmohan Singh would ever do that. He was so above board. And as you said, his family had nothing to do with. His daughters are all sort of intellectuals in their own right, and so I think what he was sort of criticized for was that he was a silent spectator when these things were unfolding around him, that he could have done more to stop it. He was
and not
human.
signed on those dotted lines everywhere he was asked to.
Yeah,
Just give the go ahead.
I mean, the thing is, history, I mean, hindsight is 2020. History judges people in ways, but this was a man who, I think, steered India out of a certain socialist kind of economy into a more market-based economy back in the 90s. He did that with Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, and the two of them literally put India on the path to becoming a modern, high-functioning country. For that, just for that, I think we will forever owe him a debt of gratitude. And I think as a person, as the Prime Minister who opened India's strategic doors to a future of today, we pride ourselves on our technological expertise. But please remember that for 40 years, we were under technological sanctions. It was that deal that opened the door to greater technologies, to greater sort of innovations that India today seems so capable of. It didn't happen by accident, and it took a lot of political capital from a person who was so quiet that sometimes you missed seeing him there. And I think that was his greatness.
A man who put India on the geopolitical, diplomatic, and strategic map. Thank you so much, Indrani Bagchi, for joining us and sharing your inputs, not just and your personal experiences while covering foreign policy when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister. Thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you.
Well, that's the news that we've been tracking, and we will be tracking. This is a continued coverage here on India Today Global. Dr. Manmohan Singh is no more, but his legacy will remain. And like Indrani Bagchi was we were just discussing, and she said that he had a lot of achievements. He put India on the global map, and how so? What were his foreign policy achievements? Log on to India Today Global. We will not just be discussing it with various experts, various people who've known him, who've tracked foreign policy when he was Prime Minister, as also when he was Finance Minister, but also the journey of Dr. Manmohan Singh. You can track all of that here on India Today Global. Thank you so much for watching for now.